Okay, so as I go, you can probably just say, mark down like what pages is, more relevant for the moment. All right. So I'm going to go to the first page. We're going to talk about seam allowances. Okay, so everything you guys have learned already, but I'm just going to review them quickly. Um, so first of all, it's quarter inch seam allowance. So usually on woven, we're only going to use that on enclosed seams, which means they are like on especially like collar bands that you won't see the seam. They are quarter inch. They're usually on the neckline and also on the collar band, front facing, and all the edges that has like really sharp curve. If you need to do a facing, you will do quarter inch. Okay, so it says neck, and the second one it says seamless arm side. So that's incorrect. Sorry, it's supposed to be sleeveless arm side. So that means your armhole, if you have just have a facing, that facing will get a quarter inch seam allowance. All right. So most of your woven garment, woven fabric, cotton, anything woven will be half an inch seam allowance otherwise. Okay. So quarter inch and half an inch usually widely used in the woven. So any seam like shoulder, your armhole, arm side, armhole, your side seam, any cutout darts, your waist, center back, basically all the seams, sleeve, even the sleeve cuff, even though it's enclosed there, you still use half an inch, okay? So that's all generally on all woven garment. 1 inch seam allowance, what is that? Usually we don't do a lot, but on better garment, you use it on the center back. I think you learned that last year. And also on top of the back rise, seam on men's dress slacks. So when you do your next men's woven pants project, which we're doing in muslin, but you will see on the center back seam, it's going to have 1 inch seam allowance. But that 1 inch doesn't go all the way down. It's going to go from 1 inch into half an inch. All right. So we can go a little more into it when we get to that. So usually for dress pants, men's dress pants, it's wider on the top and narrow at the bottom. Does anybody know why we do that? Anybody? Just unmute and just say something, because I can see you. Okay, yeah. Say something, I can hear you.
Sorry, what?
I said, why do you think we need 1 inch seam allowance on the top of the men's dress slacks?
For ease.
Not necessarily.
Future alterations?
Yes, it's for alterations. Yes. So a lot, especially tailor clothing, slacks, not jeans. People don't do that on jeans, not even on casual pants, but on like dress pants. They will want that in case you need to let it out or take it in. They always have that in the back. So on a more moderate price, they don't do that. They don't really have that space for you to do alteration. All right. So next, 1 inch hem seam allowance. So it's about talking about hem now. So if you do a 1 inch blind hem, so usually you will overlock the edge, and then fold back 1 inch, and then you do blind stitch. Now, a lot of times say, well, what if can I just fold additional, sometimes you have a too wider hem, can we fold back a little bit more? It looks cleaner, but you're actually creating bulk, okay? So for bottom hem, if you're gonna do looking really flat on the outside, you should just do an overlock edge, and then you will blind stitch, all right? So 1 inch top stitch hem. Now, it's not really gonna be 1 inch by the time you finish top stitching. Your hem is 1 inch, you also overlock, but you're top stitching, right? But when you stitch it, you're gonna stitch in between the width of the overlock, which is basically 1/4 inch. So the reason why you want to stitch in between that is so you will stitch and stay stitched that overlock, because the overlock stitch on the top is loopy, a lot of loops on the top, right? So if you stitch in the middle, then it will lock it down so it won't unravel. So that's what it does, okay? And then you have a 1/2 inch double row hem. Basically, if it's a 1 inch, you would just fold half an inch, fold another half an inch, and then single needle ones around the edge. So a lot of that, a lot of people use that for bottom of casual pants. All right, 3/4 hem, same thing. You will turn back 1/4 and 3/4, right? So this is the one that I talked about earlier. However, you will get a little thicker seam. It looks cleaner, but it's thicker. So it's completely correct. None of these are wrong. It's all design choices, okay? Next is 1.5 inch hem seam allowance for woven hem sewed to a lining. We can go into it when you actually do a lining, okay? 1/2 inch hem seam allowance, 1/4 roll up hem, so you just turn quarter and top stitch. And then the baby hem, usually it's 1/8 finish. You will have a 1/4 inch hem and you fold again, double. A lot of times it's done with a baby hem foot. Otherwise, you'll be trying to roll that 1/8. It's really difficult. Otherwise, you attach a foot, has a little curl. It's a little curl right at the needle, next to the needle, and then you just fold it and curl it in. Have you guys tried that before?
Yeah,
No?
I did it for my A-line, I think.
So anyway, you'll get to try a lot of that when we get back to on the campus. Especially that's one of the choices you can have when you do that. All right, good. And notching. Okay, so it is my experience that a lot of people don't like to put notches on it, and they are very inconsistent. So notches is really like a roadmap for pattern maker and for sewer, because right now you make the pattern, so you know what to sew, what not to sew, right, and how to line it up. But a pattern maker make it, they will have to, they don't get to explain to the operator, to the sewer sample maker. All the sample maker have to go by is the notches and the sketch. So meaning if your notch has to be very accurate. Otherwise, you're going to create puckering. Things will start pulling and doesn't look nice. All right. So like notches are used to convey sewing information, like a map for sewers to put garments together. In the cutting process, notch costs money. Now we're talking about in production now. Every notch costs money. Why is that? Especially when you do manual cutting. Okay, so the cutter, I don't know if you remember yesterday or Tuesday, we saw a cutting machine, manual cutting machine, right? So it will go around the pattern and cut the outside edge, but every time it stops, it's when they have to go, every time they cut a notch, they have to stop. So that costs time, and time is money. So that's what it meant. It costs money. So a lot of budget company, they will use least amount of notches compared to better company that actually will have a little bit more. Okay. Doesn't really affect you guys, but just keep that in mind when you start going to work, and if you ever have to make your own pattern, for your sample, that's something you can think about. All right, the system you decide to use for notches must be used uniformly throughout your patterns. So in instance, if you decide to notch the top and the bottom of the pattern for all the side seam, make sure the other pieces have the same so you can match it together. All right. Any question about that? Okay. All right. So inside notches are used for woven fabric. Now that's a typical one that you usually use, or maybe you have done before. With the exception, a couple of different category of fabrication that you will not use inside notch. One is lace, because of the open space. If you cut into it, you don't even know what you cut into it. You never see that. So you will use, instead you'll use outside notch. The second one is if it's a really loosely woven fabric, like a tweed, meaning, again, because the yarn is so loose, you cut into it, you don't see it. I mean, maybe the width of two yarns going in between, it's really wide. So in that case, you will use outside notch. So you will see where to match your notches, all right? So when you use a notcher, you'll have one, hopefully. Make sure your notcher pattern no more than 3/16 inch deep. Doing this, it will keep the pattern from tear and also from cutting out your fabric notches. So make sure you don't cut it too deep, all right? Don't notch the shoulder seam at neckline. It will create a stress area on the seam. I'm gonna scroll to the next page to show you what that means. You see right here, that's the neck. There's no notch there because it's well understood that the neckline is 1/4 inch and the shoulder you're already shown on the other side. So you don't need to notch that corner. Otherwise, if you clip a little too deep, you know, because this point holds all the weight of the garment. It's resting on that point. So if you pull it, I mean, if you have a stress point there, it might tear. You know, sometimes in the production, you know, the cutter may not be very steady, then maybe it went too deep. Then, you know, you end up losing some kind of dimension on that seam. All right, so I'm gonna roll right back. So, I'm repeating it now. Notches must match when you walk your pattern. Now, when your pattern has seam allowance, you want to match the sew line. Do not match the outside of the. So mark what you want to notch without the seam allowance, and then you add the seam allowance on the outside. All right. Don't try to go back and add afterwards. You're always going to find your sew line to add your notches. Single notches indicate the front pattern piece, right? So all the center front, you have a single notch. Front, center, back neck, and like center, back neck, you have one. So this is the whole list of things that take single notch. So I'm not going to read all of them. So you just review it, make sure you know that. Now, double notches, please make 1/2 inch apart. 1/2 inch apart. I have seen very creative 1/4 inch apart, and basically I've seen things that after I had to cut out in the middle, all the yarns fell apart. Okay, so it's 1/2 inch apart, and usually indicated for the back pattern, meaning your back armhole, your maybe seam on your back. Those will be double notches. Okay, and yeah, I did that already. And even on the back, like if you have a back rise, that will be double notches too on the pants. So in Better Company, the under collar and the collar stand are given double notch, which is at the center, you know, of that. So on under collar, so they would be able to tell them which one's the top, which one's the bottom. I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. This is just a review, right? Okay. So then again, 1/4 inch seam allowance is all enclosed seams, the neckline, the armhole, and a lot of times 1/2 inch waist are not notched because seam allowance is well understood. Notch to mark hem depth. So if without that, people don't know what's the size of the hem you want. So even though you may just mark 1 inch, you still want to know that will tell you where the finished edge is. You know how you want to stitch it down. We just went over. You know, you have 1 inch blind hem, you have, you know, maybe 1 inch roll hem, and you have doubles, you know, like fold 1/2 and 1/2 become 1 inch, that kind of thing. Those you will have to show either on your sketch or on the real sample that you actually made. So, but let's say you've decided to do 1 inch hem, but you fold twice, you won't put a notch and a notch. You're only gonna have 1 inch notch. You're not gonna have 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 2/2 inch. That won't work, okay? So just one is fine. And then the notch to mark the amount of a dart intake to distribute ease and mark pleats. So we're gonna scroll to the next page and we're gonna talk about that again. So do not notch both sides of the pattern corner if that has the same amount of seam allowance on both sides. Meaning, let me see if there's one. So if there's a corner here, you're not gonna put a notch on this side either. Okay, so let's see if I can, you're not gonna have anything like this side. Okay, so because if you have equal amount there, and again, the corner is gonna be frayed, so we don't want that. One side is plenty, all right? So I think that's in the middle of the seam. Oh, Another one is do not put a notch on the middle of the seam line if the pattern can be easily flipped and sewn. I have seen many students, if this is right in the middle, and the shape is exactly the same, maybe somewhere in the middle, they just end up turning this upside down when they sew. Then again, they have to like rip it and redo it again. All right. So these are some more pictures of what the notching guides are. So this is a really good handout. If you have questions, you just always go back and refer to it. We have, well, actually, Elisa has like work and just really include everything possible in here. So this is going into your main notebook for you to take away with you forever. So it's going to be really advantageous for you once you start doing pattern making. Okay, so here's called containment, meaning one side has a shearing which is wider, so that's called containment notches. And then what else is there? So in the direction of the notches, make sure your notch is parallel with the seam, with your sew line, okay? So always parallel to that. So here is definitely not a 90-degree angle, so don't do it this way, because that will be sort of weird. Meaning, let me see if I can do a thin line. Oh, not this. So like you don't want to do it this way, okay? That's not right. Okay, so what else? Center back neck and waist front neck. Okay, so this already talked about. So page 3, okay, we talked about that. And so we talk about single notches for the front and double notch for the back. Okay, so center front notch is always needed. Okay, make sure you have a center front notch. Okay, and center back notch too. So center front notch is definitely needed. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, no? Okay. So when I said do your notches before your seam allowance, mark it, because if you measure this line and this line here, this line is less than this. So therefore, you definitely want to do that. So when you sew your actual sew seam, it will line up. All right. Okay, moving along, notching. Okay, sleeve. Okay. So this is saying, again, I already said that. Walk the borders without the seam allowance. Okay. So this is to say, actually, most of your shoulder seam on your sleeve, it's gonna run a little towards the front side. Okay, so this is the front, this is the back, right? Your shoulder notch usually is right around here. Give or take, maybe half an inch, 1 inch. Why is that? Okay, this is just a rule. Your size of an armhole, front and back, they could be equal amount. Your front armhole will never be longer than the back. Okay, there's only a few always or must, and this is one of those cases. Okay, your back armhole always going to be longer or equal amount, but always going to be longer. Therefore, when you do the sleeve, okay, your sleeve, this from this line, let me just draw this out for you guys. This line, oops, oh, that was a curly line. Okay, let me draw a straight line. So this line, this portion and this portion, it's always equal, okay? If you need to lengthen your armhole to make them even, you will change the shape of the armhole, but you will never change this, never, like never, never. Otherwise, your sleeve will be off balance. You'll be twisted, okay? That's something you really remember all the time, okay? So now, but your armhole is longer on one side, right? The back is longer. So therefore, your back armhole will go longer and your notch, shoulder notch, will land in the front side, okay? So that's what it means by, a lot of times your shoulder notch may be landed up on the front side of the arm, on the sleeve, okay? This pattern drafting, I almost never drape a sleeve. I draft my sleeve for 30 years and it never failed me. Okay, is when you start messing around, the basic armhole shape. So the way I approach, executing a design, I usually try the flat pattern first, and then I will have a mock-up. I can cut it up in muslin and then throw in the form, and then I adjust the fit of it. Okay, so I do approach both ways, but I almost never drape the sleeve. Okay, so you probably won't ever have me ask you draping a sleeve either. Although there's a few cases I've done that. So, but anyway, usually when it comes to this kind of sleeve, I don't drape it. Okay, all right, let's keep going. So if there is a set-in sleeve, I think you learned that last year, that on the top side, really set in, like really snug fit, there's usually an ease on the top, on the capital sleeve, right? That's the mold around the shoulder, right? So that usually they can go up to 1.5 inches longer. So this part can be 1.5 inches longer than this combined. All right, so this is, again, you know that from last year. Okay, any question about that? And I'm gonna assume that no. Okay, pattern information for notch. I don't think we need to go over this. This is more, that's correct. This will be for later. Okay, so we will go through this when you actually do a mentor project, if you have like a more tailoring type of jacket. All right, now we go to seam allowances for knit. It's always 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so any block we give you, when we go back to the on campus, when we give you any block that's knit based, it could be either be like a stretch knit. It all has 3/8 seam allowance built in. Okay, so remember that. And the way you sew it is to use a 4-thread overlock. Okay, you don't really want to use single needle because when you pull it, it will break. It won't hold. So there are only 3 different kind of stitches that you can use on the knit. It's either cover stitch. Well, you sew with overlock, right? But if you do the hem, you want to use a cover stitch or a zigzag, or some of the single needle, it's called chain stitch, that will give slightly. So if you ever see a single needle on a knit, it most likely has it's a chain stitch on the back. That gives a little bit, so it won't like break immediately when you pull it. Okay, so it's 3/8 seam allowance, and the width of the overlock is 1/4 inch. So what does that mean? So you actually are cutting off 1/8 when you overlock, so you will end up with a clean quarter inch seam allowance. Okay, and you use 4 thread for all the seam. Okay, because the middle, the 4 stitches in the middle, it's a safety stitch, so it will actually lock the seam and make it more make it tighter. So otherwise, basically, sort of like how you sew in the middle of the overlock on the woven to lock that overlock down so it doesn't unravel, or what is a snag. So same concept. Okay, so yep, got over that already. So this is a photo of different kind of cover stitch, which is quite tricky to use. Therefore, you always, you want to practice, and then, we're going to talk about it when we actually have to use it, and we can go over it in a little more detail. Cover stitch is really hard. If you think threading a cover stitch, threading an overlock machine is hard, threading a cover stitch machine is even harder. Okay, it's very sort of finicky. But once you had it done correctly, it gives you the most beautiful stitches. So if you different version, it can have a 5 thread, and it can have loop on the top, loop on the bottom, same time. You will see that a lot of your active wear, leggings, so for ladies, you have yoga pants, you see a lot of cover stitch. Okay, so that's knit fabric, and when do you use 3-thread overlock? When we apply elastic on top of the of your knit fabric. So you will apply that with 3-thread overlock. Why is that? Because you actually don't need that safety. You just need to hold it. So one other stitch will be, actually it becomes too bulky. And it doesn't really need it. So they don't use it. But when you sew elastic, you don't ever want to cut the elastic. That's the only time you don't cut, when you sew with the overlock machine. So when you sew it elastic on, you would line it up so it's right at the edge of the knife. Be very careful when you go really slow, and you would just have that capture the edge of the knit and also the edge of the elastic. Okay, so if we ever go into any Lycra, actually we do, yeah, but maybe not mentor project, but you're going to do a Lycra knit project at some point, then you will actually learn how to use a overlock and full thread and all that. And I think we're actually going to do applying elastic as well. Yeah, so you'll get to experience that too. Okay, so knit notches, it's called outside notch, right? These are outside notches. Okay, I think you guys had a little template. So do me a big favor, when you do knit patterns, pull out that guide, so all your outside notches will be consistently the same shape. Okay, it's nothing worse than to have some outside notch, the single notch, a lot bigger than the other. Okay, so keeping it the same will help the sewer line up the same way. All right, so really, and that same goes to single notch, double notch, and then triple notch. You don't, it depends on what you're using. You just want them to be the same shape. Okay. Any question? Nope. Okay. So we talk. Let me see if we do this. I'm pretty sure we do this one. This is 7. Yes. So we talk about punch holes and dart. Okay. So the dart apex is the highest point of the female bust, right? And used to control and pivot points. Start the side seam dart is 1.5 inch away from the bust. If you have a side, like right here, it will be 1.5 inch away from it, from the apex. And from here, and the bottom one will be waist notch. Waist dart will be 1 inch away from it. Okay. And your punch hole, it is not at the tip of that dart. It is 1/2 inch away from it. Okay, so remember that. Do not put the punch hole at the tip, because that way your tip will have a hole. You're not covering it. Okay, so that's here. And when you put a punch hole, use an awl, push a hole in it and the paper, and then you're going to use a red pen to draw a circle. Okay, always red. It's not pencil. It's not pen. It's not blue. It's red. Okay, all right. Now, when you do an underlay dart, like when you do this, you see this little funky line. It's not really, straight across. Why is that? Because when you fold the dart together, you want it to be a straight line. You don't want it to go in that way. If you go in, then you won't cover the raw edges on the inside. So it's always done this way. You fold it down, and then you line up, and then fold over the, what they call the overlay, and then you will use a tracing wheel for that line. The last of it is fisheye darts. You want to punch in the middle of the line. You don't want a lot of guessing game here, right? So you have actually one up here, one in the middle, one at the bottom, and one on the side to tell you how wide it is, right? So it's mark 1/8 from the edge, and the other one is 1/2 inch in. So just if you ever use a fisheye dart, just come back to this little photograph and do that. And then the dart for the pleat. That's a knife pleat, right? So you do not need a notch in the middle of the pleat. You just need from the beginning at the end, all right? Do not put something in the middle. That's unnecessary. All right, and this page 2. So very important, okay? Punch mark and punch holes for the pocket placement. Okay, to get to this point, you need to, first of all, you have to figure out how big the pocket is, right? So if it's a patch pocket, you want to draw in the shape in pencil, probably, something you can erase later. And then your punch hole will be a quarter down and a quarter in. Okay, again, it's never at the edge of that pocket. Why? Because if you put it at the edge of the pocket, it won't cover it. So your pocket has to cover that, right? So after you do the 2 punch hole with, with red circle, you want to come back out and erase, get rid of the pocket line. So your pattern actually doesn't your front pattern will only have 2 dot, 2 punch circle. Okay, so that's all you're gonna have. Okay, you don't need to see the line. Same goes for well pocket. You will get the finished shape of the well, the dimension, and then you go a quarter in, a quarter down to get the middle of it. Okay, again, you don't need the middle line either. So after you finish everything, you're only gonna have 2 holes with 2 circles around it. Okay, that should be pretty clear. So, and your pocket should never have the punch holes on it. Okay, remember this. I've seen a lot of that too. So just remember to erase that. The punch holes only on what we call the receiving pattern, basically on the body. Or sometimes you have 2 pockets, maybe one stacking on top of another pocket, then this pocket will become called a receiving pattern. So, but anyway, on the very top one, you never have punch hole on the very top layer. All right. So, you have a question about this? I hope you don't, because this is a very common mistake. Okay. All right. So balancing, we're gonna skip this. Okay. This has to do with from draping, how you balance your block when you drape, after you drape. And you can read about it. May not make any sense to you. I'm not going to spend time doing this now until we actually physically do it. When we go into probably the first draping will be a bustier. Okay, so we'll talk a little more about that. But I think you probably learned some of this, especially here. You want to smooth out any sharp point on your pattern so that you probably have learned. But in terms of this kind of thing up here, we'll go over that later. Okay, this is to prevent your garment to swing forward and swing backwards. Okay, sleeves the same way. We're not gonna go over it necessarily. So we're gonna skip through here. We're gonna go to page 14. Am I going too fast? Are we falling asleep? What's going on here? I can see you guys. We okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, all right. Page 14, we're gonna talk about plackets, and they call band bags, or how you maybe do a facing. Okay, so remember, unless your faux back is on the center front, which is usually not, because you need, when you have a placket, that means you have a button or some kind of overlap, right? So that means your faux back or band back will begin at the edge of that placket. Okay, so example here, this is center front. Your faux line, the edge of that is actually here. So your pattern will get a center front notch on both sides, and then a notch on the edge, on the fold of the placket. All right. So top and bottom, you need both. Okay. So again, the operator will look at it and say, okay, so they look like this, and I'm gonna fold it, and I can stitch, and I'll know that's a fold line. Okay. So a lot of times you would want to fuse your front facing. Okay, not a lot of times, so almost all the time you want to fuse the front facing. Don't worry that it is too stiff. It won't be. You want, when you have a shirt or a blouse, you want the front to look really flat. If you're gonna have a button closure, you want that to be stable. You don't want it to be flimsy. Flimsy looks bad. It looks cheap. Okay, so think about this. Fusible is a cost. Okay, if you can put fusible in, meaning it's a better garment, because you get a better result after you have fusible. So you just have to choose a nice fusible. Don't choose a really cheap one that feels like paper. That's not good, right? If you have a nice flowy blouse and soft fabric, then use a softer one. Tricot will be nice, and knit will be nice. Some non-woven is also very soft. So you just have to be cautious how you choose it. But you definitely want fusible on all the facings, okay? Unless the fabric is really heavy, you don't need it, which I also put facing. Put fusible on it. Some people don't, but I almost always put it on. All right, so band bag. So we talked about band bag already. What page am I on? I'm on page 14. So I won't go too much into it. This is how you do the ham shape on the sleeve. So we'll come back to it for when you do a mentor project. Okay, number 15, this is pattern grain line. Okay, so this is another one that I would really must emphasize, that grain line is so important, okay? When you drape, the first thing you want to do, figure out where the grain line is, and then you want to draw a line on your muslin. Make sure it's, parallel with the selvage. Please, just pick up, cross grain and bias grain and all that. You need to mark it so you know how you want to drape, okay? Almost majority of the time, I won't say always because it's not always. Majority of the time, you're gonna start with the length grain straight up and down when you drape, because that's how the piece of woven fabric hangs the best, okay? Bias will give you the softest look. You remember how when we watched the Halston, the 20 minutes, how he was doing all the bias, it just kind of hang over the body. Yeah, it's really hard to drape on bias, okay? But they'll give you a different look. A lot of time people will actually drape on the straight grain, get the patterns right, and then they'll cut on the bias to see how it look, okay? So draping on a bias on a basic blouse is very difficult, but you can use that to manipulate the look of your garment. Cross grain, if you drape on cross grain, it won't hang, it will stick out. So when you do cross grain, your garment will look more like this, like standing away from you, okay? So very, very careful when you do this, okay? And when you draw your grain line, you want to draw all the way through from beginning to the end. You don't want to just start in the middle, okay? Draw all the way line and put arrows on both directions. Okay, so let me read this. For knits, and the grain line is the direction that gives the most strength going around the body. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we actually do your knit project. And yeah, so we'll just do that later, okay? Let's see if I cover everything here. Another thing is, you only need one grain line. There's no need to mark the cross grain. Only mark the length grain, okay? And this little thing called special grain line instruction on label in red ink. Special grain line, you don't really have to worry too much about it most of the time. So usually just with black ink, up and down length grain, okay? Okay, fabric with a nap, that's when you mark with only one arrow. Now, what has a nap? What fabric? Velvet has a nap. Some brush suede has, imitation obviously, they have a nap because they made out of a knit. So, and basically what's a nap? A nap is when a pile is long enough sitting on top of the fabric. Then you brush again brush it to one direction, it will give you a different glare or different color to it almost, or different lightness. So I think I mentioned a little bit yesterday on, let's say on a velvet, you don't ever want to do this way. Your nap always have to go up and down the same direction, the entire garment. Yeah, so be very careful when you lay a marker, when you cut your fabric, your nap has to go the same direction. Now, when you do nap down, you just put an arrow facing direction down, okay? It's like towards the bottom. Or if you do nap up, you want to do the direction the other way. What's going to happen usually on nap up? On the nap up, your color of your garment will be darker, okay? Because the light coming in is absorbed into it, okay? If you nap down, your garment will look brighter. All right. So when and if you actually go into velvet, you will see it. How do you know which direction to cut? There's no always nap down, always nap up. Okay, not on velvet, because it really depends what color you want on the final garment. Okay, some people may argue you with that, but I'm saying it. There's no always on this case. Okay, it really is which color do you want better. Yeah. So if people want richer color, they may want it to be darker, which is nap up. All right. So that is page 15. Okay, 16, we're not going to talk about it. Okay, this is to cut trends and all that. So we deal with it when we actually have to do it. Because sometimes you may actually cut cross grain because you want to follow the direction of the print, right? The print gives you, let's say, okay, I'm not going to go into it. Okay, next time. Okay, and then 17, for the left side of the page, okay. So this side is also by Mentor Project, but on the right side, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So this is where you draw all your grain line, okay? Not randomly in the middle of a pad, not here. Let me do that. Let's say on the sleeve, please always draw your grain line in the middle. Do not give me a grain line right here. That just sort of, no, it drives me crazy. So I don't do this. Not here, not randomly on that side. In the middle. If it's in the middle of a pattern, draw in the middle, please. Now, if it's on the front, usually you just go, okay, if it's on the front, oopsie, here, then you just, then it doesn't have to be a specific measurement. You can, if you want to put like 2 inches from the front edge, it's fine. Depends how wide the pattern is, okay? That you don't have to do it right in the middle. Please do not do it right in the middle. That looks kind of weird. Yeah, you will be closer to the front edge. Okay. All right. So again, let me remind you one more time. Grain line is from the edge to edge. It doesn't appear only in the middle of the pattern. So go from end to end. Okay. Okay, page 18. Oh, this is exciting. Pattern labeling. Please, different company does it differently. Okay, this is not always. However, since you are in Otis, we're gonna do it Otis always while we're here. Okay, so meaning when you leave Otis, when you go to, if you ever have to do pattern in your job, or or if you decide to have your design room, you can do whatever you want then. But right now we follow this. Okay, I sort of had to relearn this after I left because I was doing something else. So, but this is what we do. Okay, so color coding. Self is always black. Interlining is always red, right? Contrast is always blue. If you have a second contrast, third contrast, you other colors. But I wouldn't recommend something too faint. No, like don't use a really dark orange, but looks like red. Okay, that's really confusing, right? So maybe use purple. You can use them in brown pen. It depends what kind of pen. And when you write it, have it more permanent. Okay, don't write with tiny little, like, so people can see it. You want people to see it. You want me to see it. Okay, you want yourself to see it later. Okay, so you always want to match the color. Okay, they will also go into pattern card as well, which we're going to touch base pretty soon. But the grain line is always in black when you draw the grain line. So just remember this. This is the order of how you label too. You want to style number first, and then you will say how many pieces you want to cut, and then you'll write yourself, contrast, lining, that will be next, right? And then you want to do the size 8 or whatever sizes you're doing and the name of the pattern. Okay, please do in this order. Now, if this is lining, the whole thing should be written in what? Green, right? So not just right here lining green, then every single piece of writing here will be in green, except your green line will be black. All right. So that should be pretty clear. That's not any different from what you did before. Okay. And one other reminder, your punch hole circle is always red, no matter what, always red. Okay. Okay, color coding, got that already. All right, we're almost there, almost very, very close to the end. Okay, so labeling patterns with special instruction in red ink, meaning a lot of times in interlining, whether it's sewn in, not all the interlining or interfacing is fusible. Sometimes it's sewn in. You want to mark that in red. Okay, that includes something called shear shape, or tear away, which are used to stabilize the seam. We'll get to that when we go to mental project. So each type of interlining is marked in red, right? Will be listed separately on the pattern card. I think you guys done that before too. Okay, fusible interlining, that is block fuse. Have you guys done block fusing before? No? Okay, that's something new. We're gonna talk about that a little bit. So rather than, okay, for example, if you are fusing the yoke, I think you guys learn the yoke the fusible pattern will be 1/8 of an inch less, right, all the way around. Okay, which is fine, absolutely fine. Now, if you have a block fusing, meaning you fuse a big block of fabric with fusible completely, and then you lay your pattern on top, and then you cut with the fabric already fused. That's called block fusing. Okay, what is the advantages of that? That will give you really clean edges. The whole piece is very accurately cut. Then you will never have to worry about lining it up, and then oh, you line up a little bit crooked. Then then some area is not fused, or you will also avoid like leaving fusible dots left on the ironing board, okay, because you already block fuse the whole thing, right? So those are advantageous, okay. It will use more fusible, sort of, because you feel that you won't be able to use the little corner that cut in what we call fallout. Remember, we'll talk about fallout on Tuesday, right? So you won't be able to use those, but it's a cleaner cut. Okay, just remember that. Also, another thing is when you block fuse, it will help you control your shrinkage of that piece. Okay, I don't think you have learned that yet. I will periodically talk about shrinkage when you fuse. Okay, so before you cut any fabric, like when you do your mental project, you will want to pre-shrink your fabric by steaming it. Okay. A piece of fused fabric, when you steam it, won't shrink the same way as a piece of non-fused fabric. So it will give you a better control when you block fuse. Okay, so that's another thing we'll talk about a little bit later. Those are the things that I didn't learn when I was at school. So this is something I'm going to bring you something that I actually learned from the industry, which I was fascinated with because I'm just kind of geeky like that. So anyway, fusible interlining is block fuse onto fabric must have SOEF, stands for sand out block fuse. Okay, so you will say sand out or piece fuse. Okay, that's another one. Interlining that's cut separately formed must be marked in red, sand out piece fuse. Piece fuse is what you have done last year. Okay, so you want to indicate block fuse, piece fuse. This is how you indicate differently. Okay. All pattern pieces that need embroidery, pleating, screen printing, etc., will need send out information on the pattern piece, which is also written in red. So anything that has special information, write it in red. Okay, so send out block fuse, send out piece fuse, write that in red, like right here, right? GSU blue side up, if you don't write it, you won't hurt my feelings. Okay, so it's almost always understood when you cut fusible, your glue side is always facing out. Okay, that's just all often understood. Okay, so but you know, if you decide to write it, this is how you write it. So look at this example. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about is RSU, right side up. Have you guys heard that before? So right side up meaning when the piece is asymmetrical, like here, asymmetrical, you have to write right side up. Otherwise, that means you cannot flip it the other side, it won't work, right? So you want to put RSU, okay? That's one of the simplified, we use a lot of short for a lot of these because otherwise your patterns will be like, you know, covered in pages of wording. So we do a lot of like simplified word, yeah. So so label cut one, meaning just one, right? If you have identical, like left and right, you will just call it cut two, okay? So like this. Now, this is a good example. If left and right look the same, then you would write cut two. You still have to produce this another piece of pattern out of it, okay? If you're making hard paper pattern, but you just write cut two. Now, in this case, when there's punch hole or pocket on one side, you will be cut one because left and right are not identical, okay? So therefore, you will need RSU on it. Now, you see this? This is the color that you want, color coding you want to do it. This is self, so it's in black, and then RSU is in red, right? So remember this, because that's gonna come out often when you do your pattern. Okay, pattern map. Okay, last page. No, actually, that's the end. Any question?
I had one question about the block fusing.
Yes.
Is bulk something that you have to worry about? Is that like a disadvantage with doing the
Well?
block? Is bulk like part of a concern with doing block fusing? Since you're not going in that like 1/8 of an inch?
It's bulk? No, not entirely. You won't really feel that going all the way to the end. Okay, so the reason why, main reason why you actually cut off 1/8 around your fusible pattern is so you won't put glue on at the bottom of your ironing board. That really is a reason. Okay, it's not about, oh, you want to be a little thinner at the end. No, can't really feel that much. Yeah, so it's really for that. So it will be a cleaner application. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Your quiz is coming, so ask. So I'm gonna stop share. No? Okay. So I think I need to go over one more thing before we can go to the quiz. Yeah, so we're gonna do pattern card, okay? So let's do that first. Let me go look for that real fast. Okay, I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna exit. If you wanna take a drink of water, you can. I might need to. Pattern card, let me find that. Oh, you don't wanna see this one. This is my view, you don't need this. Let's see here. Yeah, this, wait. Student view? No, this is student view. Oh, they're both student view. Okay, all right. Sample, no, not spec sample. I want the, no. Sample pattern card handout, gotta be this, yeah. Yes, okay. All right, let's go to this one. And can I get full screen? Yes. Okay, so this is a sample of a pattern card. Okay, so all the patterns you do, if you do mental project and all that, if you should have a pattern card for yourself. Okay, so always fill out correctly. Okay, we'll talk about this stuff later. Okay, that's alignment on some on the text. So you want to put your sound number. Whatever you put on your pattern need to be identical here, including colors. Okay, so this is a good example. Okay, the sketch, if you can understand it, and this is a flat about a basic shirt with a lot of contrast details. So when you do your flat on a shirt, you want to give as much detail as possible in terms of your sewing construction. Okay, quartering top stitch, you can do simplified, like TS, top stitch is fine. And sometimes you want to write down what color the stitch is, if it's contrast stitching. This case, it is contrast stitching. This shirt actually is a plaid shirt, if you look at the swatches here, right? So, you can argue and say, why don't we use blue as my main stitch? So you want to indicate that here. And then you want to just give as much information as possible in the sewing construction. So the operator, this is to convey your design ideas to pattern maker, and also not the pattern maker, to the to your sample maker. Okay, so here are all the pieces on here. So as you see, RSU is here, right? RSU send out piece views, all written down here. So the order of the pattern listing here, I usually go from the largest to the smallest. Okay, so I'll put the front, right front, even the back is bigger than the front. I do the front first. So I'll do right front, left front, and then I'll do the back, and then I go to the sleeve, the yoke, and then go to the smaller pieces like your collar band, or collar stand, or you have any other like maybe a front placket, left placket, that kind of stuff. Okay, so this one is a very good guide for you to look at as a sample. Okay, here is a contrast in blue, right? So this fabrication has contrast, so that's all listed just like your pattern pieces. Now see, including the number of pieces you're cutting, it all in blue, except when you do block fusing, right? Those are always in red. So remember all this. Fusible, this is pattern that need to be fused. So they are, even though they say block fused, but that pattern needs to be fused, so they will list it here too. So they know which one needs to be done first. Here it says glue side up. So later on, you're going to do an exercise on this. So why don't you put that on too? Okay, so use this as a guide when you do exercise, and interpret the same way as this. Okay, so again, make sure you list all the number of pieces. This is one complicated shirt. Okay, the one you're going to be doing a little bit less complicated. It's a short sleeve shirt, so you have less pieces here, but try to capture the general idea. Okay, at the bottom here called outside work. What does that mean? Every time you send it out for fusing, it's called outside work, right? Here you don't have to put it in red. If you write it in red, like I said, I won't be upset. But do it like this: send out block fuse, top collar, collar stand, left placket, top cuff, pocket facing. Okay, so a lot of these are simplified words, right? So abbreviated words. So in your tab under pattern making, pattern review, there is a separate sheet called abbreviation list, something around that. The word abbreviation is on it. So those are the terms, how we abbreviate terms. So you can cross-reference that, so your abbreviated words will make sense for other people too. Okay, meaning for me when I look at it. Okay, any question here? Okay, so this sample particularly is size small, so this is called finish measurement. What is that? They will write down the chest being finished this way. A lot of times people don't write this right here, but the finish measurement, sometimes they may write down, let's say the pocket has a binding on it. They may write down the total length of the bias binding. They may write that on here too. Okay, so that's finish measurement. So if you go to the right column, top here, yardage estimate. You won't need to use this for your sample shirt because you don't actually have the pattern. Okay, this will happen when you actually do when you actually have the physical pattern. When you list your pattern card out, then you will actually do a quick yield and you will put the yardage here. Okay, over here, you always put 1 yard, how many inches? Or you say maybe only 4.4 inches, that kind of thing. Okay, you don't put decimal here. This is always in inches. Write down the whole inches. You want to write down the width of the fabric. Another reason why I don't need you to do this for the next, for the next exercise is because you won't know the width of the fabric. So therefore, this section is not applicable for them. Okay, so going back here, so you could put your name here when you do your work, and then critic here, you can either write down, maybe when you see the photo of the sample, you will see the brand, a label on it. So to put the label name on here. Okay, so size range, you should write down what size range it is. If it's small, medium, large, extra large, then you want to circle the size that's sampled in. Okay, that's when you circle it. So technically this should shift over a little bit in the size small. Okay, so if your sample is large, then you will circle L. Okay, but you want to write all these sizes out. Okay, put your date and draw your flat, and then here is the distance between your button. Okay, you need to when it is your own design, you need to specify it. Otherwise, it's up to my interpretation. Then kind of scary, right? So maybe I will put it way too high, the first one, and then the last one is all the way up here. That doesn't look good. So it's best if you specify all of them. Okay, trims. You want to put down all your buttons. Okay, what kind of button it is? What color is the button? So for your exercise you're going to be doing, you will see the sample. You see pictures of it. So you'll be able to do that, to write down either maybe call it an off-white button, maybe white, maybe black, and what is it, like 4 holes, and or is it a 2-hole? Or the size of a button, it's a strange word called line, L-I-G-N-E, which up until today I still can't really get used to this word because I don't really know where it came from. So I can share with you later on, but right now I will tell you what line the button is on the sample so you can use it. Most shirts are between 18 to 20 down the center front. And if it's a tiny one, like on a sleeve pocket, not this one, but here, that's usually 14 line. Okay, I know it because I've been looking at it for like the last 20-something, 30 years. So that's why I know. Otherwise, they're usually like a button guy. You can just bring it up and kind of match it. So usually people don't use a very big button on a shirt. It's usually smaller. And you would just count how many buttons and you list everything out. So this is where you want to put down all the trim information. If your garment has zipper, you want to put it here too. You want to write down what kind of zipper it is. You want nylon zipper, you want metal teeth, you want what color metal teeth you want. You can all write that down here. Okay. Last but not least, you want to put your swatches here. Okay. You don't put interlining swatches. Don't put fusible swatch here. Only need to do your self contrast. If you have lining, you can put it at 2, but your shirt is not going to have lining. So in this case, take a screenshot, of the photo and then crop it, put it here like this, just to represent. Okay. In real life, if you're actually doing it, you're actually going to cut out a piece of fabric and staple or tape it on top of here. Okay, any question about this? Okay, it's pretty clear. Just remember to cross-reference this with the one that you'll be working on.